With a couple of $30+ million, 30+ year old veterans on the roster, let's talk about their prospects as the trade deadline approaches. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Wizards Latest. I'm your host, Ben Robertson, and yeah, let's talk all about the McCollum and Middleton situations. Gonna jump into some Will Dawkins comments really on DC Sports Radio to bring kind of some context to those two situations. Appreciate all your support here on the page, here on the road to 1K. Do me a favor, hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're dropping your comments. Of course, comments from the previous video going to be discussed at the end of today's episode. You also see the other bullet there on the rundown. Also going to be using some Will Dawkins comments and kind of looking at the injury approach, using obviously a whole bunch of caution here this season with the young guys. Again, guys, appreciate the support here on the page, on the road to 1K, recently up and over 700 subscribers. Let's keep stacking here on Wizards Latest, and let's jump in to CJ McCollum and kind of that half of that 30+ year old pair. McCollum and Middleton, of course, going to be our first two talking points today. And with CJ McCollum, I've said here on the page before, he is number one trade priority for me as the deadline approaches. I understand the mentorship. Will Dawkins, again, in his comments here, the other day, talks about that. But letting him walk out the door at the end of the year for nothing, to me, it wouldn't be catastrophic because, again, it does free up the books. But I really do think you would be pretty disappointed if nothing comes back at the deadline for a CJ McCollum. But let's jump into what Will Dawkins had to say. I believe with the Sports Junkies, he was kind of talking just Wizards basketball a little bit. And he says, I would say CJ McCollum, and I thought it was interesting, when asked kind of about the trade situation and the trade deadline approaching. He wasn't specifically asked about CJ McCollum, but still brought CJ's name up. So he says he's been great for us, not just on the court, but off the court, the type of professional that he is, and taking Bub Carrington under his wing, Keyshawn, a lot of our wings, but also helping Alex and getting them in places where he can be a more efficient. So he's an everyday guy. He's a wizard. He fits the locker room, and obviously he's been producing as long as he's been the lead. He's going to continue to do that at a high level. So with kind of the first point I made here today, where I feel like CJ McCollum should be the number one trade priority for the Wizards, that doesn't quite sound like maybe where Will Dawkins is looking or thinking with those comments, I would say. Just those kind of flowery, very praising comments about CJ. However, I would say that's a little bit of smoke, to be quite honest, for other teams. Maybe saying, hey, look how awesome this guy has been in our locker room. Awesome he has been for our group, and he's leading the way, still producing at a high level, still with his age, still with his contract. But again, I thought it was kind of interesting because it wasn't really a guy that sounded like he was dying to trade CJ McCollum. But again, I keep kind of going back and forth on just trying to, sparse and pull anything you can out of every point Will Dawkins has to say. The one thing that really stands out to me is that he was just asked about the trade prospects, and CJ McCollum's name is the one that he pulled out, which means he's getting calls, here in the last couple of weeks since all those guys, again, he referenced this as well, became eligible earlier in December to become traded. So again, that's got to be number one priority for me. I also just think he's going to command more value back based off the way he has played so far this season than a Chris Middleton, who I got to ask, it feels like he might be heading towards a buyout, right? I don't know, it just feels that way right now to me. Again, just trying to clear out a little bit of space down the last few months of the year for those young guys that we want to see develop, given that it doesn't look like you're going to get a ton of value back for a Chris Middleton. Now, I don't see much coming in return, or maybe a deal at all being made there in terms of a trade. Doesn't mean to say I don't think Middleton can be a valuable piece of a playoff team. I'm actually going to use kind of a dated reference a little bit to Paul Pierce back in his time with the Wizards. Remember, he was 37 years old, only averaged 12 points per game, but obviously was still a contributor to a playoff squad and had really one of the more memorable moments of my lifetime as a Wizards fan. Of course, that game-winning shot against the Hawks. And remember, again, 37 years old he was. Middleton's still not to that point. So I think he actually could help a contending group. I just don't really think there's going to be a whole value back with his price tag for him at the whole bunch. Can I get this out? A whole bunch of value back for his price tag at the trade deadline. So I really do wonder, is a buyout something that was floated and kind of tossed around between us fans as an idea over the summer, over the offseason? Might that maybe discussion pop back up with the team? Another thing I wanted to discuss relating Will Dawkins' comments on DC Sports Radio. He says, we got to protect our guys and their bodies. It's his first time really going into the NBA. I believe this was talking about Alex Sarr. Or no, excuse me, this was talking about Trey Johnson, but also referencing Alex Sarr being on a minutes restriction. He came into the league with an injury. Remember, this is Trey dealing with that hip flexor. Had to monitor it through Summer League and saw it creep back up last month. So we're going to be cautious and we're going to put our players first. The reps and the minutes, they add up and they all matter. So at the end of the year, we're hoping those minutes restrictions will be lifted and those guys will be playing more on the court. I agree. Especially I've said this on the Alex Sarr front. I know I stumbled on that. It was a Trey Johnson comment he was referencing there, or talking about Trey Johnson in his comment. But I've said on the page, using caution with Alex Sarr, I'm more than okay with. I mean, he's a 7-footer. We all understand the injury history with 7-footers in the NBA. Let's not force him through things we don't need to. On the Trey front, I do wish the team had maybe been just a little bit more transparent with that hip issue, because we were all kind of going, hey, what's wrong with Trey? And then he left the lineup and then was back in it, and it was just because, his hip was bothering him. If that was something coming into the league that he was dealing with, I wish we maybe heard just a little bit more about that. Now, again, on the flip side of that, the team might not have been, rushing to shout to the world, oh, our guy that we just drafted number 6 overall already has a hip problem. Now, Trey, back in the starting lineup, or back in the starting lineup at all over the last couple of games, back in the the rotation here as of late, and has really started to trend forward. So we're hoping he stays healthy and looks good down the stretch of the year. And I've said, really, I think over the last week or so, I'm hoping even more so that CJ McCollum gets moved at the deadline, just to open up more of a runway for a Trey Johnson, really see what he can do kind of just with a lengthened leash in the NBA. Let's jump into the comment section from the previous video. Appreciate all your support, all you guys dropping your thoughts down below. Mark Casino says, having a bad attitude doesn't make you tough or gritty. That was talking about Ja Morant yesterday. We were kind of throwing around those discussions. I guess that might have been a couple of days ago after the Memphis matchup. Some interest there from fans. I'm not really sold on the Ja Morant front. Mark Casino agrees. Shout out to Baltimore, Get Up 9537. He says it's no question that Trey is a top scoring option on this team, maybe even a number 1 guy on the team at some point in the year. The Wizards need another big and a point guard. Do you think they pursue a point guard or a big before the trade deadline and draft? So on your first point, and that's what I'm hoping we get to with a Trey Johnson. By the end of the year, I'm hoping we're saying, or kind of putting him up in that Con Knipple class of guys that are kind of leading their offenses and look awesome and lighting it up from 3. Right now, he's definitely doing it from 3-point land, coming off that career high performance the other night. And I'm hoping we just get more and more of that. He just kind of gets unleashed on the NBA as we go this year. Now, to your second point, Wizards need another big and point guard. I mean, clearly you identify the 2 needs going into next year. Point guard, we have to solidify that situation. It's Bub, or it's, might be somebody else. Maybe you're not leaning towards Bub, or maybe Bub can prove himself at that spot the rest of this season, but that has to be figured out. I think that in the draft, I have said, and I'm going to reserve the right to change this pick because we got college basketball, a whole bunch of it remaining this year, a whole bunch of conference play in college basketball. But right now, I'm leaning towards Boozer or DeBonsa. I think I can see Boozer fitting in at the 4 and Sarr at the 5 really well. DeBonsa just everything when I watch his game. And it might be, I'm getting fooled a little bit by him jumping out the gym and just looking otherworldly at times. But his talent just seems franchise changing. Peterson, I love too. He just has been hurt, to be quite honest, a whole bunch to start off this year, which makes me a little bit nervous. But again, if it was the latter two guys, and let's just say it was Boozer strictly off fit, right, and you put him at the 4, I would really like the team to go out and pursue a guard, a point guard at the trade deadline or over the offseason, even if it isn't one of these huge names that we always talk about, even if it's just somebody that brings organization and structure to the offense, I would really love that for the team. Live Ride 59. My comment king, I'll give you the last thought here today. Finally here to catch a show from the get-go. We appreciate that. Typically, episodes dropping at 11 a.m. So make sure you've tuned in. I guess turn on post notifications while you also hit those like and subscribe buttons. Picked up Trey everywhere in my $250 to $500 NBA fantasy leagues. Got faith he'll get defensive stats too. Sarr's been great, but all-stars never disappear in games. Still fine with Bilal's production and just want him to remain consistent. Agree with your last 2 points there, big time. With Alex Sarr, and we've talked about maybe a borderline all-star in terms of his effort so far this year, but it does still show you that consistency and those nights that the other night, 2 points, 1 of 5 in 25 minutes, just kind of completely disappeared. We couldn't find him at either end. That's not something, those all-stars, those superstar level players do, and that's still kind of the bridge, for him to gap and kind of the next step for him to take. And then also agree with you with Bilal. I say it all the time. Hey, I don't need him to be an offensive superstar. With how good he is defensively, if he can just give us solid production on the offensive end of the court, you're really pleased with a Bilal Coulibaly. But that's going to wrap it up for our show here today. I'll quit yapping. Do me a favor, hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're dropping your comments. Appreciate all the support here on the road to 1K, and thanks for watching another episode of Wizards Latest.